Greetings, Communication 526 colleagues. My name is Heather Abenti, and I'm going to be your guide through Signorelli Chapter 6 in Part 4, Essays 1 and 2. Just a few things before we dive right into the material. You'll notice that as we go through this video, the slides from the PowerPoint presentation will be included as we change topics, so you'll be able to easily follow along clicking through the presentation yourself based on those slides as they come up in the video. Also, there's some sources outside of the textbook that are included in this presentation, and you'll find those on a reference slide at the end of the material. If you would like to do any extra reading beyond what is included in the presentation, all that information is there for you. Finally, I would just like to warn you that we are in the middle of Tropical Storm Bonnie right now, and so if you hear any kind of thunder in the background, don't be alarmed. It's just Bonnie raging outside the Carolina coast. We're going to jump right into the story branding process, and Signorelli introduces us to those 6 C's of story branding. This is the workflow to help create the story brief, and it's the marketing communications plan or the blueprint for all of the communications related to the brand. The first C is to collect the backstory. This is what traditional marketing often calls a situational analysis, and it's the background that helps to explain the problem that the brand is looking to solve. It identifies the problems and the opportunities that must be taken into consideration. And LaPlante uses this example as understanding your brand. This is where you're going to get the background information about your brand so that you can better understand it. Step number 2 is going to be to characterize the brand. This is where the brand becomes the hero of our story, coming to the rescue of the prospect. We're going to determine how the hero is portrayed at this point, and this starts with deeply examining the brand and not the prospect. We're going to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the brand and our wish list for the brand's meaning in the future. At this point, we're not discussing anything about the prospect. We're simply diving deep into the brand itself. Once that's complete, we're going to go on to step number 3, which is to characterize the prospect. This happens only after the brand has been fully characterized, and this is going to identify the most likely prospects who would need what we are selling. We're going to understand the functional problem of the prospect and the beliefs and values that drive the functional need that the prospect has. At this point, then we'll move to step number 4, which is to connect the characters. We're playing matchmaker. We need to understand the shared beliefs and values between the prospect of the brand and bring the brand and the prospect together by identifying and evaluating obstacles that are in the brand's way. And Bohe and Kahn suggest that this is the point where corporate social responsibility can come into play. This allows the larger brand identity to be connected with the prospect through some of those values and corporate social responsibility activities. Step number 5 is going to be to confront the obstacles. Prioritize those obstacles that are keeping the brand from achieving its full potential. Mink suggests that we should specifically describe obstacles to help build the drama of our story and to include what is at stake for the brand and the prospect. And the goal of this is to reach that level 4 connection between the brand and the prospect that brings about brand loyalty. Step number 6 is going to be to complete the story brief. You're going to review all of your information for a logical consistency and summarize the steps 1 through 5 in the story brief. And the story brief is what outlines the entire brand story. We're going to use I am statements from the brand and the prospect's perspectives to help create empathy and a sense of connection. And this is going to then define the unique value proposition of the brand. So a summary of these 6 C's is that they must have a logical consistency between all the defined story elements of the brand. The plot and the themes should be evident. Those were discussed in a previous chapter of Signorelli if you need to review that. And it's important to note that this is an analytical and a creative process. It is not an either or, but both analysis and creativity play a role in creating your story brief. Part 4 houses essays relating to the story brand process, and we're going to also look at essays 1 and 2. In essay number 1, we learned that it's difficult to change brand perceptions once a strong association with a certain product has been established. Exceptions to this are Apple, Nike, Virgin. These companies are selling stories, not just brands or products. The failure here can occur when there is no inner layer or where an inner layer is not clearly defined for a brand. And LaPlante says that most brands are focusing on the wrong values and that story branding is the process that helps the brand focus on the right values. The outer layer gives us those functional and demographic basics, but the inner layer provides those authentic values that are inextricably linked to what the brand does. Signorelli says that inconsistency is the bane of authenticity, and it's important to note at this point that perception is reality. Prospects don't care what you tell them about the brand's inner layer, they care about what they think the brand's inner layer is. So it's very important that we're portraying the right layer to the prospect. The theme must speak significance of the brand's story, and the brand must solve problems and provide opportunities for the prospect. You complete the brand story with proof of the brand's belief system that is consistent. Once again, consistency is the key to establishing a set of authentic values that are relatable to the prospect. Essay number 2 deals with the brand's true emotional core and that it must be expressed in the story. And we're given 5 steps or tricks to help increase the volume of the brand's authentic story. The first one is to ladder up. This is where we focus on the most important functional outcome and derive the underlying value from that functional outcome. Second would be to identify what your story isn't. This is the opposite of your brand story. You're going to define what your brand is not in order to help you more clearly understand what your brand is. Number 3 would be to describe the enemy. What enemy must be overcome? Develop that enemy character with the things that your brand values least, and that will help you identify the brand as a character and what is most valued. Number 4 is going to be to find a role model for our story character. Again, we see the brand as a character, the hero in our story, and we want to identify a hero in literature, in movies that best represents our brand. And the important thing to note here is that there's a difference between what is done and why it's done. We're looking to go beyond the what is being done, that functional use, and get to the value and belief of why our brand exists and why it does what it does. Step number 5 is going to be to get feedback from customers, employees. We're going to ask customers and employees what they think is most valued by the brand. This is because experience with the brand should help identify those values, and it can bring clarity or reasons to better tell the brand's story. So as we look at these 6 C's and some of the additional helps to get us through the process of creating our story brief, think about a brand that you are familiar with, and can you see evidence of the story branding process with that brand? Is there a clear, logical consistency to the brand's story, or is it lacking that good, clear blueprint for communications, and how can you tell that? What can be done to help this brand move through those 6 C's of the story branding process to create a more comprehensive blueprint for communications? Thank you. I look forward to seeing your responses.